Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Strategic Alignment podcast. And I'm super excited today. I have with me Robert Henley. And, Strategic Alignment podcast, we say inspiring growth and sustaining excellence. And we have a guest with us who's going to share with us as we talk about failure management. But before we go deep into failure management and how do you deal with failure, how do you bounce back, how do you deal with challenging areas, whether you're a student, whether you are somebody in the working world, whatever you're doing, how do you deal with that? So, you know what, Robert, in a elevator pitch style, you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do and stuff like that? The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay, yes. So I'm currently a student pursuing two different bachelor degrees, one in mechanical engineering and the second in applied mathematics. And I also do a lot of like research and development for different various companies for like the government and departments of defense. I've worked for companies like the Applied Research Lab at Penn State, as well as NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory out in Pasadena. And I use the skills that I learned at school and at these companies to mentor different startup companies and do some consulting and stuff like that. And I
Wow.
also hold a lot. Sorry, I also
Go,
hold
no,
a
go,
lot.
go ahead. Go ahead, man. The floor is yours. Go ahead, man. Go ahead, Rob.
And I also hold a lot of workshops and boot camps for my fellow classmates to kind of give them the skills that I've realized was useful for my experience out in the work field.
Wow, wow. So there you have it, guys. So as a student, a researcher, an entrepreneur, a mentor, and a motivator, inspiring not only people within his age group, but older folks in business in terms of moving in an innovative, creative, agile way. Robert has been using his skills to create change and to create that kind of impact that is needed, so that organizations and leaders and people, just regular people too, can experience certain kind of success that they need as they move forward. But today we'll be talking about a topic, and before going further, please make sure that you hop onto Amazon and purchase a copy of the new book that we have out. That is the face of leadership, and we talk about the 8 framework in terms of successful leadership. So check it out. And Amazon, you could get your Kindle copy and your hard copy, please, and leave a comment after you're through reading it. But Rob, as we talk about failure, and as an entrepreneur, as a student, and even as a researcher, I think you have the position of seeing a lot of failure. My question is, why are people so afraid of failing? Why is it that you have so many people who are scared of failing? Anything that has failure written on it is almost like they treat it like the plague. Why is it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I personally believe, and just from like my experiences of dealing with people, that it's because it's the way society views failure, especially in the education system. You know, if you fail a test or an assignment, you only have one chance to get it right. And if you don't get it right, that's it. It's over. But to be honest, that's not how the real world works. Failure, to me, a lot of people view failure and success as complete opposites, but the way I view it is failure is a tool to achieve success. And you could see that a lot, especially in the world. There are many successful people who they don't get it right the first time. It takes time. You have to stick with it, but in sticking with it, you'll eventually find the right way to do it and get it right. And for example, Thomas Edison, when he was doing the light bulb, he has this quote, and it really stuck with me. And it says, I'll read it so I make sure I don't say it wrong. But I have not failed 10,000 times. I have not failed once. I have succeeded in providing that he's basically saying that there are 10,000 ways of not doing it. And then he found the one way to do it. So it's just it's a constant trying different things until you get it right. I would just say that people don't realize as long as you learn from your failure is a good thing.
Yeah, and Robert, as a researcher, as an entrepreneur, as a student, as one who come across a number of other students and people who are doing business and leadership, I think you're in the right position to recognize that sometimes when people are failing, the failure is just success is just around the corner.
Yes.
But a lot of people end up just waving the white flag as they get to that position and give up when they all they needed was one more try at what they're doing. And you see a lot of people, like a lot of students, as you said. I like what you made mention, that the educational system is geared towards having you fearing failure. But real world tells you that the people who have the greatest success are the ones who took the time with failure. But Robert, I know that people want to hear this. And have you ever experienced any significant failures? And I know that maybe you weren't planning for that question and stuff like that, but have you experienced any significant failure or any failures that, like, dag, I'm done. I'm closing the shop. I'm giving up on myself.
Yeah, I honestly, I, I personally, I got to the point where I realized, if you're not failing, you're doing something wrong. You're supposed to be failing. But I've definitely experienced a lot of failures in life. Um, uh, for I'll give. It's funny now, but looking back on it, especially during the moment, it was really bad. I was working for NASA, and I had to do some data, some work on the data, and I was learning a new program. So, and this program's called Airtable. And I like the way it was explained to me, they said it was in like an Excel sheet. So I thought I had like, my own Excel sheet, and I was working on it and removing things and changing things. I didn't realize it was changing everything, changing the data for the whole team. Man, my supervisor came in and called me, and like was like, "Hey, like, what are you doing? Did you change stuff?" And I was like, "I mean, yeah, I was doing what I was asked, or I was doing what I thought I was being asked." But fortunately, they were able to recover everything that I changed. But I mean, I learned a great lesson. That was I in my books, that was a failure, but we're that didn't discourage me from the rest of my internship or time being there, and I was able to continue to work. And I can say now for sure, I became, because of that experience, I became an expert at Airtable. So yeah, it's just um, failure is, I think again, just from my experience, you have to be comfortable with it, and being able to like uh, you know s- uh, sorry, for lack of better words, like state that that you did mess up, and that, and be willing to work through that, and just continue to push forward.
That's and as you make mention of that, Rob, in terms of comfortable with it, being comfortable with it, that
Mhm.
experience, I know of people who they've had an experience, they have a bout with failure, and what they end up doing, they leave the scene because of the embarrassment. you know why is it so important for you to bounce back after failing? As you made mention, you said that because of the failure that you experienced, you became an expert at that
Mhm.
given software tool that you were
Mhm.
using. So it means that you spent some time with that failure. So
Yeah.
my question to you, why is it important as an entrepreneur, as a student, as a researcher? Why is it important for you to bounce back and remain focused on
Mhm.
on your purpose, as opposed to just being fixed on the failure itself?
Yeah, so I would say the reason that it's important to be able to bounce back is because that's the difference between people who are successful and people who aren't. Um, and especially in the engineering field, my father, he's always mentoring me and talking to me. One thing he talks about is STEM resilience, and again, especially in the STEM fields, failure is a big part of it, because you're trying to figure out the right way to do something. So being able to constantly, learn from those who like just pushing through to finally succeed. And then another quick example I can give is, before I had my first internship, I was told no by a bunch of different companies. I was a freshman. They all assumed that I didn't have the skills that were needed to successfully complete an internship. But if I had listened to those first few companies who told me no, then I would have never gotten the internship that I got. So, it's important, because you never know. All you need is one yes, and you never know when you're gonna get that yes.
So could you elaborate a little bit on that? That story sounds juicy. I can't just leave you like that, Rob. But could you
Okay.
elaborate a little bit on that? So you said that as a freshman, when you
Hmm.
try to get your first internship, you had a lot of people telling you no. What?
Hmm.
How did that make you feel, knowing that you're being told no in the thing that you think that you're good at?
Mm.
It's almost like, if I'm a singer and they're telling me that I can't sing, then should I just put the mic away? If I'm a
Hmm.
leader or a speaker or a coach, well, you're telling us that, the thing that you wanted to do, you
Hmm.
went to people and you said to them that this is what I'm good at. I'd
Yeah.
like an internship. And they told you that, guess what? Nah, not this year, not this
Yeah.
time. How did you process that as a young leader, entrepreneur, and researcher? How did you process that and use that experience to take yourself to the next level and still securing an internship?
Yeah, I would say it definitely wasn't easy at first, and I feel like everyone goes through this point in their life when they're dealing with with people, or trying to get things from people. Is, you have to be willing to be told no, and just know that that's okay, because you're not the perfect fit for every single company. But I mean, the thing I knew in my head, I had a dream, I had a goal, I was determined to reach that goal. And I like, just because, there's so many companies out there. So just because someone told me no doesn't mean that everyone else would tell me no. So I just kind of, I really just fell back on all the support that I was given. There's a lot of people who've been with me through my whole life and supported me, and especially people like my parents and my family and friends and teachers back at school. So I kept pushing because I knew that it was something I could do, and also wanted to do it for people who, um, so that people just like me have somebody to look to, so that I in the future can say, hey, I know what you're going through. I've faced a similar experience, but keep pushing, because if you do, you'll be just like me, where you become successful. So
And I saw Jude's just sent a message. She said that emotions are what really fails us most times. And as you're saying that sometimes it's not, sometimes we turn away from where we're heading because of the emotions that we're experiencing, not understanding that turning away is not just turning away from that opportunity, but we're actually sometimes turning away from our purpose.
yeah,
And failure can be deflating. As
yes,
we talk about failure can be deflating. Is like you tell somebody that you're going to get a job, and then you're boasting about it. You turn to what happened to the job? I didn't get it. How do you explain that? How do you deal with that? And many times we walk away from that scene because we don't want to be attached to the failure, not understanding that not because I've failed, it doesn't mean that I'm a failure. And as we look to grow, we have to move away from that.
Mhm.
Well, let me ask you this, Rob. What steps have you taken to overcome some of the tough and deflating experiences that you've
Yeah.
had as a researcher, as a student? And those who are just joining us, just remind you that we're with Robert Henley II, a student, an entrepreneur, and a researcher. And he's here with us as we talk about failure management. And as we're also looking through the book, The Face of Leadership, and you could get yourself a copy of that book on Amazon as we talk about how do you deal with failure and how do you use failure to your advantage as opposed to allowing failure to stop you from progressing towards your goals. So the question I just posed to Robert is, what steps have you taken to overcome tough and deflating experiences that you've had?
Mhm. Yeah, so I would say the first and most important step, at least for me, is faith. I um I believe that something my father would always tell me. There's a verse, and ever since he told it to me so many times that it really sticks with me. And it's Jeremiah 29:11, and it basically says that uh, God knew you before you were formed in the womb, and He has a plan for you, a plan to give you a great future. So anytime I fail, I know that either that wasn't the path that I was supposed to take, or I just keep on trying until I succeed, and I just know that I do have a good future in front of me. But I also I believe that as a leader, it's important to know yourself, and know your weaknesses and know your strengths. So when I'm dealing with failure, I kind of take a step back out of the situation and look at it and say, hey, why did I fail? Again, most important things to learn from those failures. And then but also, if I can pinpoint why I failed, and maybe it may have been my fault, then figure out, like, okay, so I found a new weakness in myself. And then going forward, knowing that that's a weakness, I'll either work with people or talk to somebody who's an expert in that field. I know as a leader, you're not going to be an expert at everything. So you have to really be able to know yourself and know when to lead and when to ask people for advice, or for help.
So what I'm hearing also is that we have to be willing, like a surgeon, to assess our failure, because what happens sometimes we move so quick from the scene, we don't
Mhm.
even get enough information moving forward. So what we
Yeah.
do, we find ourselves repeating the cycle because
Yes.
you didn't take the time to see what. Because as you're saying, Robert, sometimes we fail not because our idea is not the best.
Mhm.
Sometimes we fail not because we don't have the right step or in the right place, but sometimes we're in the wrong environment. Sometimes we're getting the wrong advice.
Yeah.
Sometimes our approach is off. Sometimes our timing is off. And if you put it all together and forgetting that there are other elements that could have caused you to be in the position that you're in, then you may end up making rash decisions,
Mhm.
which will not help you in the long run. And I think that's one of the things that impact a lot of companies. And my question, Rob, now is, why do you think so many companies or teams fail to secure record-breaking results?
Mhm. So Before I answer that question, I just wanted to add one last thing to that, the last question. And it goes on to, again, with emotions is, you have to be able to, after you admit your failure, be able to, um, move forward. Don't dwell in the past. I mean, even to this day, I catch myself once I make a mistake, I'm thinking about it constantly, like, oh man, why did I do that? But it's so easy to get so stuck and hung up on your mistakes that you forget that you have a future and just continue moving forward to that. But yeah, like, sorry. Yeah, sorry. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
don't dwell on the mistakes you make. Just there's nothing you can do to change the past. Once you've made that mistake, you've made it. Okay, like, what can you just focus on what you can do now? And leading up to why do teams fail? I've read. My father has told me about various different books, and I've read a lot about that, and I've heard so many stories. And when you're listening to, I encourage everyone to find some people and on the fields that or either it's like someone that you want to be like, or you can learn from, and just really get into their stories, because you can see like how so many things can go wrong. But I would say to kind of make it a generic or a generic thing would be really just the leader. As a leader, you have to be able to really step back from your team and look at, hey, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and you have to be able to communicate well and trust each other. And I would say that a lot of failure comes either from the lack of communication between the team and the leader, or the lack of trust between the team and the leader. As a leader, you have to be able, as I was mentioning before, is to communicate what, as a leader, what your own strengths and weaknesses are, so that your team knows how to better help you. And then also, something that I do when I'm in leadership positions is, especially if I have a weakness, I find somebody who that my weakness is their passion, and I try to really put them in positions that it betters them. So, for example, if I'm starting a company, I want to create a logo, or like I'm doing PR and stuff like that. I would find somebody who that's their passion or their major in, and say, hey, I have an opportunity for you. Would you like to help me out with this? And then that way we both benefit from that mutual relationship. And yeah.
Yeah, wow. And as you're saying that, Rob, in terms of assessing, and you made mention that sometimes when people would have failed, they are stuck in that position, but they
Hmm.
need to bounce back, not only bounce back, but they have to follow through.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you bounce back to the same position,
Yeah.
back into that same place, but you need to really know, okay, I'm going to take the steps necessary to get to that level that I'm at. As and I could just imagine, as a mechanical engineering student at the University of Alabama, you must have faced a lot of challenges, you get me, with
Yeah.
everything that you do as a student there, and being a part of all these organizations and everything that you have done. What advice do you have to young leaders who are looking to pursue their dreams, to pursue their goals, or even
Hmm.
established leaders
Hmm.
who they feel as if they allow failure to determine how hard they push and how far they go?
Hmm.
What advice do you have for them?
Yeah. So I mean, I would say the first thing is, if you know have that goal, that passion, find your passion in that goal. Because once you have that, it makes it so much easier to push through the failures. Because I know at the end of the day, I want to be an engineer and I want to be an entrepreneur. So at the end of the day, I have that in mind, and I keep striving and pushing for that. And there's nothing really that's going to stop me. If I reach an obstacle, I just find another way. Having that goal makes everything just so. It doesn't make it easier, but it makes you are more willing to go through things, because you know that like the struggles that you're going through now are worth it. And then after you have a goal, really surround yourself with great people, again, as I mentioned, and knowing your weaknesses. Because again, as I mentioned, if you surround yourself with great people, then they'll be able to help you with your weaknesses. I wouldn't be able to make it this far if it wasn't for my family, friends, and teachers, and everyone who's really just supported me to get to where I am today. And I know that together we're all going to be able to go further. And then the last thing, and something that I'm very passionate about, is really just reaching back and helping those behind you. I do a lot of boot camps and workshops, because after being at the places I've been, I know, because you don't know what you don't know until you get there. And you're like, wow, this is all this. So I just like knowing learning what the things that you need to know and the skills that I need to have. I really just try to reach back to my fellow classmates and people that I mentor and say, hey, this is something I learned, or this is a skill I have. I would like to teach it to you, and give them a boot camp just to help them further succeed. Because one thing I know is if you have a good circle, a good friend group, the further, if you help everyone succeed, the further that circle goes, the further you can go, and the further that everyone can kind of lift each other up.
Oh, that's cool, Rob. And you said something that I want to take with me also, is that,
Mm-hmm.
failure also forces us, instead of using it as a deterrent in terms of moving forward, we should use that to remind us that there are others in our circle or elsewhere
Mm-hmm.
who are better at the thing that we're failing at. And if we pull them into a circle, it puts us in a better position to win. Because
Mm-hmm.
not because you need a car mean that you're good at making everything that the car needs. Well, at least you could find somebody who could do other things. And by doing that, you could take yourself to the next level. And I think it's important that we understand that failure sometimes should force us to secure the right unit, the right
Mm-hmm.
squad, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to force us to go backwards where that is. Rob, the conversation has been good. I've been enjoying the conversation, but we're not going to leave as we talk about failure management without you telling us where they can find you and stuff like that, because others would want to hear from you as a young leader, entrepreneur, student, and one who has just been blazing the trail in terms of doing great things, and a mind space that understands how important it is to be involved in failure management, as opposed to allowing failure to be the ceiling to where you're heading.
Yes, sir. Yes, well, I really enjoyed our conversation too. And you can reach me on LinkedIn, Robert Henley, or my email, which is robert.incipient, INCIPIENT @gmail.com.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. So, everybody who's listening, thank you guys very much for joining us on another Strategic Alignment podcast with Robert Henley, a University of Alabama engineering student. He does such great things. So please follow him, check him out, and you could invite him to do stuff with your groups, with your leadership team. As an innovative, agile mind, he can take you places in terms of your thinking and your organizational growth. And again, guys, please don't hesitate to jump over to Amazon and grab yourself a copy of the book, The Face of Leadership, an 8-part framework that helps leaders, emerging and established leaders, in terms of growing themselves, how they deal with failure, how they deal with foresight, awareness, agility, and when you think about confidence and clarity, and finally energy and execution, in terms of not just dealing with failure, but smashing and getting the kind of results that you need to push your organization forward. So guys, thank you guys very much again for joining us, and please have yourself a wonderful time as we close out for another Strategic Alignment podcast, inspiring growth and moving towards excellence.
Thank you for listening to the Strategic Alignment Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to our podcast by visiting our website at www.pottingerandassociatesconsulting.com.